Hello, my name is Osha. I like talking about American presidents and I discuss US laws, international human rights law, and uh, you know, today is March the 5th, 2026. We're a few days, at least 5 days into the war with Iran after the decapitation of the Iranian leadership uh, through the action of the joint US and Israeli forces. Now, I've been seeing, of course, Congress has been up in arms about the president going to war without the authorization of Congress and whatnot. I've done videos discussing, war powers resolution, and of course, it is um, it constitutionally, the president hasn't violated U.S. laws right now because it was Congress that sort of abdicated its responsibility to declare war, right? Its responsibility to be the only authorized body to declare war. Um, Congress did this years ago, right? Abdicating its responsibility. Um, its authority to declare war, and not the president's, um, through its its blanket carte blanche use of authorization uh, for the use of military force and you know other instruments. It's allowed the president of the United States to act in what's called limited military interventions. And, these have, of course, escalated over time into undeclared wars like Vietnam. It's funny that America is, since its independence, America has actually been at war for 93% of its independence. So, yeah, I think 225 for at least 225 years of America's independence have have embroiled America in some kind of military action through whether it's a declared war. War has only been declared by Congress 11 times, but apart from that, we've had these so-called military interventions and conflict that we've engaged in. So our military has constantly been engaged in warfare. We actually manifest Newtonian physics, right? A body in motion is constantly in motion, right? A body in motion tends to want to be in motion, and it can't stop except if an external force affects it. So our military has constantly been in a state of warfare since our inception, and it's like we can't stop that constant warfare. Um, you know, Talking about Newtonian physics, um, I did military history. I took a course in military history. When I was in Nigeria, I was taught by uh, an Oxford trained Irish professor, Dr. Yearwood, Professor Yearwood, and we learned the works of the foremost proponent on war strategy, military strategy, Karl von Clausewitz. He was a Prussian military officer, and he said war is the continuation of policy by other means. But war is a very ugly thing, right? It's a very ugly thing, and you know, I've been watching debates by Congress in which they've said, well, that the president hasn't been able to provide justification for going to war. No doubt, according to international law, the U.S.'s actions are illegal, right? When under international law, the UN Charter, we're not supposed to engage in regime change. We cannot violate the sovereignty of another nation. We're not supposed to engage in political assassinations. We've violated those laws, right? International law. So we struck first, right? There was nothing preemptive about what we did, right? There was no imminent threat. This idea of preemptive strikes, right? That's just state paranoia. And of course, because we're a warfaring nation, right? Our military cannot stop fighting. We're constantly engaged in warfare. Perhaps America has become a paranoid state, right? And this so that it believes things that are not factual, right? I just belief that other entities are trying to attack the nation when these are not factual, right? So America is sort of in a state of paranoia, in which it just they always constantly feels threatened, right? And now, if one pivots on the the theories of Karl von Clausewitz, um, he says, where he uses Newtonian physics. That's every action generates a reaction or an equivalent, reaction, right? An equivalent opposite reaction. So um, we struck Iran by decapitating its leadership, right? The political assassination of its leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei. It doesn't matter that it was terrible. It doesn't matter what he's done to his people. Under international law, what a leader is responsible to its people, and it's his people, the populace, right? In this case, Iranian citizens are the ones to hold him accountable, not America, right? Not Americans, right? Americans are supposed to mind their business, right? It's just like there are Americans who, what Americans say about their president, President Trump, that has nothing to do with the outside world, right? There are Americans today who are aghast, who wonder that why is it that somebody who was convicted of 34 felonies is president, so, but that has nothing to do with the rest of the world. So we have procedures, internal procedures, right, that deals with that internal procedures that address, how our polity is run, how our government is run. That has nothing to do with the rest of the world. That's sovereignty, because America is a sovereign state. The same thing with Iran. It's not that I'm, I when I say these things, and I'm just explaining the law or talking from a point of the perspective of having historical knowledge and I'm applying it in analysis. It's not me being pro Iran or being pro, the Islamic government. I couldn't care less. I'm an American citizen. My loyalty is to America, right? It's America I give my oath to, right? That's who it's America I owe allegiance to. I'm not concerned about what goes on, but I am concerned about how America is regarded by the rest of the world, that America is a force for good, that America is an honest broker. Those are things that I'm concerned about. And as I was saying, with regard to Newtonian physics, how Carl von Clausewitz applied Newtonian physics, that every action generates an equal reaction or equal opposites, equal equivalent opposite reaction, right? So we struck, America struck the leadership of Iran. Now, the opposite reaction is it that they're going to just come and strike our president as well. They don't have the capability. At least that's how I understand, the the comparative military strength we have. They don't appear to have the capacity to do that, right? But they will engage in asymmetrical warfare. They're going to do other things, right? They're going to expect a response in other ways. So it's asymmetric, unconventional warfare, and don't expect the conventional battle formation, right? They can't match America in its naval force, its military strength, its weaponry. You know, they can't match America in those things, or Israel. So they're going to apply unconventional methods, right? That's just given, you know. So war should normally be the last resort, and in terms of when the military goes to war, when the U.S. military goes to war, having worked in the Department of Defense, I understand the mindset of the U.S. Department of Defense and the military. The objective of the U.S. military is one thing, to foremost. Let me not say one thing. Foremost, to maintain military supremacy. That is actually, those are the words we use in the Department of Defense, right? To maintain military supremacy in the world. So when you tell our soldiers to go to war, they go and destroy, right? Those are not the sort of words that our politicians use, or even we as citizens use, right? American citizens understand that they only go to war. I don't think our objective as citizens is that we have military supremacy over every other, over every other nation. That's not what is paramount in the mind of the average American citizen. The average American citizen is concerned that if we're attacked, that we're able to defend ourselves, right? When our founding fathers, the framers, drafted the Constitution, right, and ratified the Constitution, we were not the most powerful nation in the world. We even hardly had an army. Many of our founding fathers, especially the ones from the South, who were slaveholders, right, they didn't want a standing army, like James Madison, Thomas Jefferson. They didn't want a standing army. They were very suspicious of a standing army, because they believed if a standing army were there, it would give rise to a military dictator. A dictator would be able to control a very strong standing army, and it would eventually infringe on the rights of the citizens, right? So these were the concerns. It's ironic that these two men who opposed a standing army, who opposed, over centralization, when they became presidents, right? Thomas Jefferson became our third president, James Madison our fourth president, and James Madison is often called, father of our Constitution. They ended up really centralizing power. These two men ended up centralizing power. So just as, is it the British, is it Lord Acton who said power corrupts and absolute power corrupts absolutely. So it's one thing to have the ideal, but once you get in the office and you're holding the reins of power, you have the reins of power in your hands, practically you do something that's different, right? And talking of practically, I've been talking about realpolitik, right? Realpolitik, that what America is doing right now, what our president is doing, realpolitik, that's, the cynical, practical pursuit of national interests without uh, without constraints of morality, right? Ideology. Just being pragmatic and pursuing national interest, and in a very cynical fashion. So America wants to maintain its supremacy, uh, uh, you know, limits the power, limits the decimate and limit the power of its rivals and the ability of its rivals to rise. That's because realpolitik, that's what we're seeing. In a way, that's what we're seeing. where the president says he's decimating the power of Iran and their military, because it sees maybe he sees Iran as a potential rival in the Middle East, and America has interest in the Middle East, right? And of course, there's Israel. I don't know if Israel is supposed to be a proxy for America in the Middle East, or I don't know who's controlling who, whether America is the puppet of Israel or Israel is supposed to be the puppet of America. But in this case, in the Middle East, it's clear that Israel's enemies are America's enemies. So our president is applying realpolitik. Realpolitik is from Otto von Bismarck, right? He was German chancellor in the 19th century. Realpolitik does not work for a republic. The proponent of realpolitik, Otto von Bismarck, right? His entity, his state was a monarchy, right? Was a monarchy. America is a republic, and its representatives, its representatives and its leaders are supposed to be answerable to the people, right? Unless we're moving dangerously close to establishing a dictatorship. Often we like to compare ourselves to the Roman Empire. The Romans became an empire under emperors who had absolute power. They didn't have checks on their powers. Augustus made sure that the Senate were just a rubber stamp body. They were useless. Augustus, the emperor, the first emperor of Rome, controlled. He had every executive, judicial, legislative power were all in his person. The senators were just a rubber stamp body. Every official was just a rubber stamp figure, right? Manipulated by uh, Augustus. They were just tokens, right? And that's not how our framers created America. We're not a monarchy, so we can't just say we're applying realpolitik. And remember what von Clausewitz said: every action, that's Newtonian physics, every action can expect an equivalent reaction, opposite reaction, right? So when we are waging war, decimating Iran, or whatever it is that we're doing there, we can expect a fallout. It has implications that may not be immediate, they're long term. So when Al Qaeda hits New York, I'm not justifying it, I'm talking about history. When Al Qaeda struck New York in September 11, 2001, and we were the victims of a foreign attack, foreign aggression. Historians will look back and say, okay, what did we do? Did we play a part to precipitate that assault, that seemingly unprovoked assault by Osama bin Laden and his cohort, his adherents, right? Did we do something? Well, one, America created Osama bin Laden during the Iraq-Iran war, whatever. The was it the Afghan? There was a war in which America was, the CIA had started financing and sponsoring, um, you know, had started sponsoring those who came to become Al Qaeda in wars against proxy wars, America's proxy wars against the USSR, right? Saddam Hussein, America, I read Reign of Terror a long time ago. Saddam Hussein was sponsored by the CIA, the US Department of Defense at one time. I read Reign of Terror, you could see it. So it turns out that many of these people who turn against us later on, at some point we enabled them to do some other dirty job internationally. And then they come back and they attack us, right? So now that America's attacking Iran, and decimating it. What other terrorist organizations are going to come up, start attacking Americans in the future? That's so. These are things that our leaders and have to consider before they go to war. Apart from the real consequences of war, apart from the damage it's doing to our image, right? That we are now becoming it's like we're operating by the law of the jungle. Might is right. Okay, we have the most powerful military. Okay, how long are we going to have the most powerful military? We have the most powerful military because our taxpayers pay a lot of money to fund to build up that military capacity. And of course, the other part is we've been at war constantly for 93% of our independence, right? So we've just become sharper, like the Romans. We imagine we're like the Romans, right? How long will our how long will our citizens fund a very costly military? It has implications. Eventually, one of the things that broke the Roman Empire was the citizens got tired. They were overburdened by the taxes they paid to fund such an extensive military. And these militaries just splintered up, right? They just broke up. They factionalized, right? Everything that rises is going to fall. Everything that rises is going to fall eventually. And there's a rise, there's certain to be a fall, right? America should remain that force for good in the world. That's how I see America. It should remain that force for good in the world, in which our leaders, our country, our leaders are seen as honest brokers, right? We don't want to be like Hitler and the Nazis who were liars. Remember when we study history, we talk about how Nazi Germany was clearly the offending party, the aggressor, how they invaded Poland, all the things they were doing, their atrocities, they were dishonest, right? Now, America was engaged in policy discussions with Iran, and we end up going to invade and assassinating a nation that had not attacked us. They hadn't attacked us. Just a few months, a few weeks earlier, we invaded Venezuela and kidnapped their president. So now we're acting like we're the mercenaries who have this huge military at our disposal, right? And we're not looking like the honest brokers, the force for good in the world that we're supposed to be. Just because we think we can play real politics, what about the citizens of America? How they see America, how they see the world. The citizens of America are the ones who make sacrifices. It's the citizens of America who send their sons and daughters into the military to fight the wars, whose sons and daughters will die, will become disabled, right? They will become disabled. They will, you know, there's a real cost to war, not just the fancy mechanic. I talked about, the cool part of, like what seems like the theoretical and, the application of theories of war, right? A body at war is constantly, a body in motion is constantly at emotion, right? So therefore, the American military has remained preoccupied with war, just as like the Romans did, constantly fighting one conflict or the other to make sure our military is not lazy, right? Right, that's like Newtonian physics, inertia, right? So a body at rest tends to want to be at rest, it becomes lazy. So we spark up for we charge our military and make them constantly engaged, right? Just like that was one of the things that I read Ulysses Grant's personal memoirs, and that was one of the things he did. He kept the Union forces constantly moving. They would build things, they would put things about parts, they would dredge, they would dredge areas, build roads, build bridges, put it, dismantle bridges, build new ones. He kept them constantly moving, right? That was what Ulysses Grant did, just like the Romans did. We're constantly talking about how the Romans built roads, their engineering. It was their soldiers that did that because their generals kept them moving. They were constantly moving, right? Constantly moving because a body in motion tends to want to be in motion, and a general wants a force that's not lazy. Generals want their soldiers to be active, right? When combat comes, they keep fighting. That war machine, right? Create that fighting war machine. But we think about the military force, the army, as a machine, right? The military forces, army, navy, air force, they're machines, right? But it's human beings, right? It's human beings that make up the military, and their real human costs when we engage our soldiers, our brothers, our sisters, sons, daughters, when we engage them to go and fight foreign adversaries, right? There's a real cost. Many of them may never come back. Many are maimed. Many will become permanently disabled. All of them who see combat will likely suffer PTSD. PTSD is terrible, right? People who suffer PTSD, it's ironic that when I read the biography of Lincoln in the Civil War, many people we never talk about this. And something that triggered me to consider, this aspect of relatives who go to war with us, and how it's really families that are divided, and the real cost of, in lives, and how going to war brings out the worst in mankind. Lincoln's half Lincoln's brothers-in-law died in the Civil War. His wife's family, Lincoln's wife, came from Mary Lincoln. She came from a slave-holding family in Kentucky, right? And several of her brothers were soldiers in the Confederate Army. The Battle of Shiloh, which is considered, I think it was the deadliest battle uh, during the Civil War, which was under General Grant. Two of Mary Lincoln's brothers died at the Battle of Shiloh. Her brother Alexander, her brother uh, Samuel, two of her half brothers, two of her brothers. All her brothers, I think she had another brother, Todd, who was in George Todd. He was in the military as well. He was in the Confederate Army as well. Her brother-in-law, her sister's brother, her sister's husband, sorry, a Benjamin Hardin Helm, was a brigadier general in the Confederate Army. He died in battle as well. Died fighting against the Union. So her husband, Abraham Lincoln, was literally commander in chief of forces that were killing her family, her siblings, her relatives. Even Ulysses Grant's family, his in-laws were also in the Confederate Army. Um, his wife, Julia Dent, his wife's family, the Dent family, were a slave-holding family in Missouri, and several of her brothers were also in the Confederate Army, fought on the Confederate side. So you can see siblings going to war. Already, things I'm seeing, there are many Iranian Americans, right? There are many Iranian Americans. And I've done videos talking about, how they're doing very well in America. But these Iranian Americans all have relatives in Iran, right? They go back, they could link their families going back centuries, right, in Iran, because those are their homelands are right there. Many are tearing up. They're doing videos now, tearing up. I remember I just saw one video in which an Iranian American, a female, was saying her father that she's worried about her father. Her father is in Iran. She doesn't want him to die. And here's America bombing, bombing Iran. So there are many Iranian Americans now that are going to, their loved ones are suffering in Iran in this needless war. It's unnecessary. What is America's objective? In terms of once we send our military to war, again, the objective of the military is very different from the objective of American citizens. The Department of Defense is organized to maintain U.S. military supremacy in the world. So when the soldiers go to war, it's something vicious they're going to do. They're going to decimate. They're going to destroy. They're going to use the force. Just like when Lincoln authorized Grant, President, he was just General Grant at the time, to go to war against the Confederates. He had one goal. Grant had one goal: destroy the Confederate Army. Fight them all the time, destroy them. Our military has that capacity. They could, if you decimate Iran, these historic sites, these nation, this 5,000-year civilization that we read of, when we read of them in the Bible, we see we know of the great things Iranians have done. The military is not going to be thinking of preserving anything. They're just going to, they'll do, the end justifies the means. They're cynical. Their job is just to maintain America's military supremacy. So if the president is telling the U.S. military that they pose a threat, they will rival them in strength, even though it's not the president who should be giving them that information, because the military has its own intelligence. And according to Congress, they claim that the U.S. military said no, that Iran didn't have that capability, that they were not building a nuclear bomb, they were not preparing for an attack. There was no imminent threat. They had no capacity to rival the U.S. But the military follows instructions. And so when the president sends them out and they've gone, they're going to destroy. So what is America's objective in Iran? Is America attempting to, is America's goal to destroy Iran completely, a 5,000-year civilization? Is that what America is intending to do? Because it will change who we are as a nation, right? It will change. It will start to make Americans start to look like Nazis. Like that was what because that was what the Nazis wanted to dominate. That was all they wanted to do, and there was no sense of morality to their rule. And America is supposed to be a moral nation, right? We are a moral nation. That's how I see America. A force for good. So these are things considerations we have to, contemplate. We have to, it have to be top of mind. Anyway, let me stop this video here. I can continue later on. My name is Osha, and I'll keep you posted.